because he'd already said he owned all that property. He said, yeah, okay, have at it. So we walk about 300 yards up there, and lo and behold, there's the gap. There's the two Bactrian camel humps, prominent gap. They also said that when you were coming from Charleston toward Fort Loudon, when you went through the gap, you got this commanding view of the mountains. Well, if it wasn't for all that second growth stuff there, all this stuff right here, you can actually see through, and you see the entire, what folks call the blue wall, the Chattooga Ridge, you know, the wall of mountains up there, a commanding view of the mountains. Bingo, no more calls, please. We have found Gap Hill. And you might notice that I turned around and looked, and I told Jane, I said, it's too bad that sign wasn't there in 1763. Might save some lives, you know. Well, this is Gap Hill Baptist Church, and like I say, sure enough, if you walk around down behind the parking lot between the social hall and the church, the old Cherokee Path is right down there. That's it, right behind the church. It's the real deal. That's it. See how I'm talking about? Everywhere you go, this is about 4.5 to 5 feet higher than the other way you can know the difference between one of these old colonial roads like this and just a washed out place is they have a flat bottom. Obviously ditches have a, you know, narrow pointed bottom from erosion. But even though it's 300 years old, it still has a flat bottom. This is the town of 6 Mile. The Cherokee Path literally ran where this asphalt road is, because another thing that we have found, and we figured this out pretty quickly, all across the state, whenever they had gone to the trouble to get up on a ridge, they stayed on that ridge as long as they could. In the vicinity of Columbia, sometimes for 20 or 30 miles, big, huge sand ridges down. That's the Sand Hills region of the state. 6 Mile is actually on the apex of a ridge that runs about 2.5 miles. Then it drops down and crosses the 12-mile river right above where this dam is. This is a dam for a little small community's waterworks there. And that's pretty well documented crossing there, even though it's under the water behind this dam. I'm 100% confident that's where it crossed 12 Mile. That's the slide that's out of place. That's the old stone church. Remember when I showed you Andrew Pickens' grave? I don't know how that got out of place, but that's the old stone church between Clemson and Pendleton. Well, all of a sudden, it's back in there again. This is pretty interesting. This is at Old Stone Church, 50 feet away from Andrew Pickens, and it's an Indian grave. And all it says is Ostanopa. I know you can't read that because of the angle of the camera, but it just says the Indian's name, Ostanopa. I don't know what the story is, but you know there's got to be a story there. There's old Indian fighter Andrew Pickens buried 50 feet away in Ostanopa. I don't know whether they were big buddies or lifelong enemies, but I guarantee you there's a story there. Okay, next stop. Let me tell you what I do at this point. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I think it helps to tell this story. No, maybe not. Okay. Not much is known. Yeah. Not much is known about where something called DeWitt's Corner was. DeWitt's Corner was a trading post in the 1760s on the Cherokee Path, and it is somehow associated with due west. And here's the connection. I don't know that anybody else has ever figured this out except Dr. Lowry Ware, who I'll show you a photograph in a minute that we eventually met. He is a retired history professor from Erskine College in Due West, and he's written the definitive history of Due West. And all these old maps will show DeWitt's or Deweese or Due's Corner, which is the forerunner of Due West, and they spell it about 6 different ways. The fellow's name was William Dews, D-E-W-E-S. This entire area of where Anderson County, Greenwood County, and Abbeville County all come together was for a long period of time settled by French Huguenots, some of whom spoke English and some didn't. And those who did speak English spoke with a French inflection. This had been their lifelong language, and even though they maybe had learned English after they arrived in Charleston, they still spoke with a French inflection. They looked at the man's name, D-E-W-E-S, Dews, as Douay, and they wrote it as D-U-E-T-T. You see that on a lot of the old maps, Duet's Corner, and DeWitt's Corner, D-E-W-I-T-T-S, and Douay eventually became Due West. There are all sorts of folks who have speculated about due west is actually 30 miles due west. No, it's not 30 miles due west of anything. It's from Due's Corner. I finally met Dr. Lowry Ware. This is it. This is where Due's Corner, Mr. Due's, Captain Due's trading post was. This is where Due West started, at Due's Corner. We met Lowry Ware. What I was trying to find, I'm going to do this other section, then we'll come back to the story, because this is the creek just down behind that Anderson County sign. That's the creek where the trading post was located, right there where the Cherokee Path and now the modern paved road crosses that little creek. It was called Corner Creek, and the Indians called it Yellow Water Creek, because every time a group of men on horses or wagons would go through the creek, it would stir up the yellow clay, and the creek would be yellow for 3 or 4 days. So the Cherokees called it Yellow Creek or Yellow Water, and the Europeans all called it Corner Creek. Very near there is Cokesbury College. It's now defunct. It was a prominent academy back in the very early 1800s. Had a whole campus and a village called Cambridge, grew up around it. As a matter of fact, maybe 3 months after we photographed this, went back by there, and the Cokesbury College itself was for sale. Right by that building, if you think about the slide you just saw, 50, 75 yards to the right, that's the Cherokee Path right there. Thanks to Roy Vandergrift III, and he's right on this one. If you've ever been to Park Seed Company, you know, they have that annual flower display. That's Park Seed Company, and I went in because Roy Vandergrift had said that the Cherokee Path ran in the vicinity of Park Seed Company. Well, as a writer, I need to be a little more specific. If I'm going to tell the reader it's in the vicinity of the Park Seed Company, I need to know where, you know, how did it run. So we go inside, and at that time, the company was founded by George Park, I think in the 1800s, late 1800s. And his granddaughter, Karen, had inherited the company not very long ago. I had seen it in an article in the newspaper. So I go in and I asked for Karen Park to see what she knows about the Cherokee Path. And she said, they said, well, she's not here, but her husband runs a bookstore down on Main Street, and he knows all about the Cherokee Path. So we go down to Main Street, we find a fellow, nobody's in the store, and he spent an hour drawing maps and showing us. Turns out it ran right through here, right in front of the entrance and right by the demonstration gardens. And he's got it all documented, you know, from the original plat and everything. And as you pass Park Seed, maybe a quarter mile toward Greenwood, that's where it came from across the road and ran through the gardens that you just saw. Right past that is a little historical marker right on the side of the road for Tabernacle Cemetery. Obviously there's no church, but down that dirt road, not so far, maybe 300 yards, is the old Tabernacle Church, Tabernacle Methodist Church, and there was an academy there too. This is the cemetery for it, and like I say, the church is long gone, but this road runs right by the cemetery, Cherokee Path. You can see, there's Jane and I. It's not quite shoulder deep, but that's also dead level up there. It's not a ravine or a slope. So that's the real deal too, no doubt about that. You go just a little bit farther down that road that goes by Park Seed, and there's a development called Cherokee Hills, and the Cherokee Path runs through the golf course down there. So that section, some little short sections within the golf course are preserved, and they've got a little sign up. Then when you get to 96, just outside of Greenwood, Fort 96, the old Revolutionary Fort, it actually had been a colonial era frontier fort long before the Revolution. When you enter, the monument there actually is more to the Cherokee Path than to the Revolutionary Fort, which had I'd say as important as Fort Prince George in the Cherokee Wars. If you've never been to Fort 96, it's a national monument now, run by the National Park Service, I think. Really, really nice. Nice asphalt paved walkways with interpretive information all along. This is the Star Fort right here, or at least where it was. It's kind of funny. You get past the Star Fort and they got directions on the Pacolet Path. You can either turn here, go to Pacolet, or turn left and go to Charleston. This is the Cherokee Path. They've got a sign. There's your pal walking down the Cherokee Path. Apparently headed to Charleston because I got my day pack on. And now in this place, obviously that's not a good slide, but in this place, the roadbed is at least shoulder deep there. There it is. Yeah, clearly that's the real deal. Now, I've already told you the story of yellow water. You know how the Cherokees called it yellow water. Now, here's the thing that threw us off originally when we were out there searching for where the Cherokee Path was in relation to due west. That sign is at the entrance to Erskine College. So it would lead you to believe that the Cherokee Path kind of went in, you know, the entrance to Erskine. No. It didn't even go through modern day due west. It was about 6 miles to the east of due west. Here's what happened. We went by Cherokee Trail Elementary School right outside of due west, between due west and Donalds, a little crossroads town of Donalds. And Jane, being a kindergarten teacher at that time, I said, it was summer, but I said, she can get us in. Real teacher and everything. So I said, let's go down there. Somebody, teachers are always working during the summer, and somebody will know why this school is called Cherokee Trail. So we go down there. I said, that girl right there, she's a teacher. And we're trying to find the Cherokee Trail, South Carolina Wildlife Magazine. And by the way, years ago, when Governor David Beasley was governor, the Wildlife Magazine, or the Department of Natural Resources, had a shirt, a regular staff DNR, really nice green shirt with it said staff South Carolina Wildlife Magazine on there, and they were going to give it to him for having signed some bill they wanted signed or something. Well, it didn't fit him, so he gave it back. He said, make me another one. So the editor of the magazine says, Dennis, you want this? And I said, yes, I do. So I'm a freelance writer. I've been writing for them for a long time, but I don't work for them. So now when I go around to the state researching articles, when I go into a library or the Historical Society, I walk up to the desk and I say, I'm Dennis Chastain with South Carolina Wildlife Magazine. Anything you want, whatever, how can I help you? People will mortgage their houses to get their picture and their name in South Carolina Wildlife Magazine. So I have on my shirt. Anytime we're out exploring or doing things like that, I wear that shirt. So I go into the principal's office like this, because we'd gone into the lunchroom and there were some folks in there eating their lunch, and told them what we wanted, and they all pointed down the hall and said, y'all need to go talk to the principal. So we go down to the principal's office, and I said, this is my wife, kindergarten teacher, and I work for Wildlife Magazine. And we're trying to find the old Cherokee Path. What I really want to know is, why is this school called the Cherokee Trail Elementary? He said, because in his office, his desk is by the window, he said, because it was right over there. He said, actually, it ran right down through this. Remember I talked about being on the high ridges, all that? This ridge goes right by the school. He said it was right over there. He said, but you need to go talk to Dr. Lowry Ware, who is, and I just told you, retired history professor. He knows everything about the Cherokee Path and the history of Erskine. So there we go. Next thing I know, we go, and he's retired and has been for a number of years, and they have a retirement there on campus. And we track him down, and we go, and he ain't there. I mean, you figure, you know, retired people, you can pin them down and you can usually find. No, he's off somewhere at Callahan's orchard picking peaches for everybody. So we have to make an appointment to come back at a later date. We did finally meet up with him, and Lord, the man is a walking encyclopedia of information about Cherokee Path and the history of due west and all that. That was a great experience, and really, I don't know how we would have ever solved that mystery of the relationship between the modern day due west and the real DeWitt's Corner trading post if it wasn't for that encounter with Dr. Lowry Ware. If you go a little ways down the road from Cherokee Trail Elementary in the opposite direction toward the little community of Donalds, you see this Boonesboro Township historical marker that indicates the Cherokee Path crossed the township boundary 1 mile south of here. On a later trip, we were in the Edgefield Library, and right out there among the newspapers and the magazines and the current periodicals, they had a little rack of old maps. So I'm quite old. I couldn't believe they were out there. One of them was a plat of the entire Boonesboro Township from the 1760s, and it showed the Cherokee Path going right through the middle of it. So that was a real find. Just, I'd say 150 yards beyond that historical marker, Donalds is not a very big, it's a crossroads town and not a lot of buildings there, but one of the buildings has this wonderful mural, I suppose, of Cherokees, and apparently somebody's aware of their Cherokee heritage, and in fact the Cherokee Path came through there. When you get to Saluda, South Carolina, which is where Roy Vandergrift III is from, the bank has this wonderful mural here. That is Governor James Glenn and Attakulla. I've already met both those fellows. And this is to commemorate the very first treaty ever signed between the Cherokees and the colonial government there, not in modern day Saluda, but at a place called, the historians call Saluda Old Town. It was actually a Native American village, not Cherokee. It was Saluda Indians who are thought to have come from New York and settled down here temporarily. Smallpox all but wiped them out, and it's thought that the residual population merged with the Catawba, so it's kind of disappeared. But it was the scene of the first treaty ever signed between the South Carolina colonial and the Cherokees. Roy Vandergrift, like I say, he spent a lot of time on this, and I don't in any way want to diminish or demean what he has done. He's a very competent historian. It's just that sometimes he falls for myths and things like that. Roy has found quite a number of artifacts. He and his friend found this mile marker on the Cherokee Path in Saluda County. It's in the museum there. When you approach Lexington, South Carolina, which is the next thing on the old Cherokee Path between Saluda, Lexington is northwest of Columbia. Everything has grown together in Columbia now to the point where you have to really know where the dividing lines are. It's all Columbia. But there is a discrete town called Lexington, and the Cherokee Path went right through Lexington, and when you come up behind the Super Walmart, there's a road called Old Cherokee Trail. And I have verified through probably the most prominent historian, certainly the oldest historian, 93, in Lexington, that road is in fact the route of the Old Cherokee Trail. Right there by the Super Walmart on the garden shed side. As you leave Lexington heading toward Columbia is a historical marker that you have to risk life and limb. We went by it 3 times before I thought it was worthwhile to try to find a place to park. It is a really busy road. It goes between Lexington and Columbia, comes out in West Columbia. And you have to find a place to park, go in there, and you have to park in a trailer park, where people live, to walk to the historical marker. You just have to pull up in somebody's yard. But anyway, what's important about this is this was the intersection of a western branch called the Occoneechee Path that went to Savannah. So it was an important trading path that intersected with the Cherokee Path, and it was called the Occoneechee Path because it was actually used and in large part constructed by a group of Indians that not very many people know about called the Occoneechees. And they lived on an island in the Dan River in Virginia and used this path to trade in Augusta, Georgia and all the way down to Savannah. And this is where they intersected there. When you get into Columbia proper, or actually West Columbia, if you're familiar with Columbia, South Carolina at all, do you know where the Capitol is? And the Carolina Coliseum, where they play basketball, that's Assembly Street. The Carolina Coliseum is on a corner, Assembly Street that runs by the Capitol this way, and the road that crosses the Congaree River right down behind it's called Blossom. If you turn right on Blossom and cross the river, the first thing you see is a Lizard's Thicket restaurant on the left. That Lizard's Thicket restaurant is on Old State Road. And this historical marker is just behind the Lizard's Thicket there. Old State Road was built in 1820 and ran all the way from Charleston through Saluda Gap up here in northern Greenville County and all the way into the French Broad River. And Joel R. Poinsett, who introduced the poinsettia into North America, built the state road, and he used the Cherokee Path as much as he possibly could. This section of the Old State Road was the Cherokee Path. That's Brooklyn Casey High School right behind the sign there. Just down beyond Brooklyn Casey is Congaree Creek, was the scene or the site of Fort Congaree, which you remember I told you that Governor James Glenn was the one the light bulb came on and got to establish this relationship and trade with the Cherokees, and the Cherokee Path was the only way to accomplish that. He improved very early in his administration, he improved the Cherokee Path from downtown Charleston to Fort Congaree right there in Casey, South Carolina by 1715. That's early. And established the first trading post with the Cherokees called Fort Congaree. And it's was located on Congaree Creek right behind the sewage treatment plant in Casey. And I know that because when Janie and I got down there, I kind of got lost. I had been told, well, it's so-and-so and you can't see it now, but it used to be over there and there. Well, I have a good friend who's an archaeologist with the South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology, Tommy Charles. And I called Tommy and I said, Tommy, we're hoping to get lost down here, and I'm trying to find the old Fort Congaree. He said, I know right where it is. I'll be down there in 15 minutes. So Tommy came down there and showed us actually old Fort Congaree is in those pine trees right there. Right there. That's right behind that sewage treatment plant. And Tommy verifies that is the old original Cherokee Path right there. I keep wanting to say Kings Highway because we have now been working for 2 years on another colonial road, the Kings Highway. If you've ever been to Myrtle Beach, you know Highway 17 is called Kings Highway. Well, this is the real thing. This is the real deal. We have now spent 2 summers researching the route of the original Kings Highway as we did on the Cherokee Path, and that article will be in the May-June issue of South Carolina Wildlife Magazine, which really will be out in about 3 weeks. So we're going down next week. We're going down next week to do a slideshow like this on the Kings Highway at Coastal Carolina Thursday night, and then in McClellanville the following Friday night, I think. So stay tuned on that. Particularly, I know several of you mentioned that you subscribe to the Wildlife Magazine. Like I say, that's coming up in just a few weeks. Well, we made it as far as Columbia, and that's pretty good. There are a lot of stories and a lot of territory between there and Charleston, but maybe we'll save that for a later date. I do want to very quickly just go right through some of the scenes because I want you to see Flat Stanley down there where the thing ended on the Charleston Peninsula. And I want to tell you one quick story. It is absolutely hilarious. We get all the way, there's Stanley at Fort Watson on Lake Marion. We get all the way down to Goose Creek, South Carolina, just outside of Charleston. And I had read, I guess I got it from Roy Vandergrift. He says the old Cherokee Path went right in front of the town hall for Goose Creek. Well, I had not been to Goose Creek since the 1960s, and it was just a little crossroads community. And I said, well, I'm sure it'll be easy to find. How big can the town hall be in Goose Creek? Well, you can't hardly tell Goose Creek and North Charleston from Charleston now. It's all went. We rode up and down that road, and I'm looking for some old 1950s vintage town hall. Finally pulled in a filling station, and I said, I give up. where is the Goose Creek Town Hall? He said, it's right over. I said, you mean that modern brick building? He said, yeah, they just built it 2 or 3 years ago. So we go over there. This is the gospel truth. We get out of the car, we walk in, we turn left and go in this office right here. And there's 4 or 5 ladies sitting in there, and 2 of them are behind the desk. And I walk up to the lady and I said, I'm from South Carolina Wildlife Magazine. I'm doing an article on Cherokee Path. And I said, I've got numerous old references that say that the Cherokee Path ran in front of the town hall at Goose Creek. But this is a new building, and I don't know whether it's an old one or what. And she said, well, I don't know either. She said, but I've got one of those guides that they publish to all the historical markers in South Carolina. So she turns around, goes in the file cabinet, digs the thing out. And she's sitting there at her desk, and she flips through there, and she finds Goose Creek. And she looks up, she says, come with me. And so we walk outside, come out here, and there's a historical marker right there. And it says Cherokee Path once flat right there. Yes. She was embarrassed. She had worked there 8 years and didn't. Now, in her defense, there's some crepe myrtles. There are some crepe myrtles that kind of obscure it, but there it is. There's the deal. And then King Street in Charleston, which is one of only 2 streets that runs the entire, this is the one with Saks Fifth Avenue and all the big high-end stores and stuff. King Street was the King's Highway. It was originally called the Broad Path, and it takes you right down to the Battery, and there's Platte Stanley. Okay, well, I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have too. Voice held up.
Thanks so much for coming. I do want to just tell you, I think most of you all know about PAC, Pacolet Area Conservancy. Believe it or not, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. We are a membership organization. We would encourage you to become a member or make a contribution. We're nonprofit, and donations you make are tax deductible. Put in that plug, that's what they pay you to do. So, I also want to mention that these series where we bring in these wonderful speakers are supported by the Polk County Community Foundation. So we're grateful to them. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Let me just say one thing, because you may upon reflection say you want to do what Dennis and Jane did, and I really, really encourage it. It's a great way to see places, excuse me, I got a fisherman's friend in there, that you would never see otherwise in South Carolina. They've kind of out of the way because when the interstates were built, they were too far away. Go to Roy Vandergrift's website on the internet, just Google Cherokee Path, South Carolina, and Roy has got a drivable, you can print it out, and Jane has always been my navigator. Jane will sit over there and say, okay, turn left at Old Stone Church or something. Just go Google the thing, and you can go drive from Pickens to downtown Charleston.
Well, your trips sound really fun.
Yes.
I'd like to hang around with you.
Yeah.
How many days it would take an Indian along that path?
Well, I have a journal, it's the only one in existence, I think, of one of the troops who left Charleston and went all the way to Fort Prince George, and it took them about 2.5 weeks. Now, that's not one man on a horse, because, you know, it takes a little longer to cross the rivers and stuff, but I'd say generally it took about 2 weeks. Yeah.
The other part of the Highway 11.
Right. The Cherokee Scenic Highway is called that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I guess I wasn't going to tell them, but because of where we are in this northern Pacolet area watershed up here, I went to my old 1776 Henry News map for the whole state of South Carolina, 1775 actually, and it's very detailed, and it shows another Kiowa path, Indian path, Cherokee Path, starting at Fort Prince George, running the route of Highway 11, that's why it's called the Cherokee Foothills Scenic Highway, it generally paralleled this other Cherokee Path that came right through here.